Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. We're just letting everyone in and we'll get started in just a second. Okay, it looks like we have everyone here. So thank you all for being here. We are super excited to have you. Leanna, I'm going to go ahead and ask you to share your screen so we can welcome everyone. So good afternoon. You are here because you are excited about learning about guaranteed basic income, learning from the innovations, learning from what folks have already done. And we are super excited to have you all. My name is Marcy Bowers. I'm the Executive Director of the Statewide Poverty Action Network, and I will be acting as your MC today. So I just want to kind of do a little bit of basic housekeeping. We'll be mostly in the speaker spotlight role today. So if everyone could mostly keep their cameras off and their microphones on mute so that we don't have too many distractions. We have a great lineup today, and I'm super excited for all the folks we're going to hear from. So first, we're going to hear from the always amazing Jenny Romick. She's going to share some research findings related to GBI. Next, you're in for a super amazing treat. Dr. Aisha Nyandaro will be here. She's from the Magnolia's Mothers Trust in Mississippi. They've done an amazing project there, and you're in for a treat to hear all about it from her. We'll also have Heather Hayes from the New Leaf Project up in Vancouver, BC. Who will talk about the pilot that they've been doing in Vancouver. So lots of kind of on the ground, this is what's happening. And then we're going to hear from Megan Matthews at DSHS, who's been one of the project leads on the state feasibility study. So we'll get an update from her. And then hopefully we're going to save time for Q&A at the end. The ideal is that we're going to save a few minutes after each of the presentations for a few questions. But if not, we're going to try and hold a little bit at the very end. So, you know, kind of what are our goals for today? You know, the main idea is that we're going to just hear what's been working. What does the research say? What are the things that we expected to happen? What are some unexpected things that people have learned along the way? And I think we want to be clear that talking about a guaranteed basic income we're getting to the point where it's no longer a complete leap of faith. We're getting good data. We're getting good research, we're having good pilots that are happening, and this is really gaining momentum, and we're super excited to share what we've been learning in hopes that you all will get as excited about the possibilities of this work as we are. So without further ado, we are going to turn it over to Jenny Romick from the West Coast Poverty Center. Her bio is going to show up in the chat, so please take a quick perusal of that, but don't spend too much time looking at that because you should absolutely be listening to what Jenny has to say. Thank you. Jenny, go for it.
All right. Thank you, Marcy. It is an honor to be here today, particularly with the incredible Marcy Bowers at the helm. I'd also like to thank Lori Lippold, just the one, not everybody is showing up here as Lori Lippold's on screen. Anyhow, it's an honor to be with you here today, and it's a true honor to be on the agenda with some folks who are really leaders in doing income transfer work. So I am a professor at the UW School of Social Work, and I'm the faculty director of the West Coast Poverty Center. And my job here today is just to take a step back and talk a little bit about what we know about guaranteed basic income approaches. I'm going to go over some basic concepts, talk about why income matters, and give a high-level overview of some important trials and evidence that we have in line here. So first of all, I want to talk about what we mean by basic income approaches. Basic income schemes or universal basic income or guaranteed incomes are more broadly examples of income transfers, of payments that represent redistribution through public systems. And there are some different flavors these types of programs come in. One is whether they're conditional or not conditional on some type of behavior. One type of income transfer requires certain types of activities. So for instance, there have been income transfer programs that pay parents if their kids are enrolled in and attending school. There are certain programs where you have to participate in work activities to receive a benefit. Another characteristic of income transfer programs is the extent to which they are means tested. Are they more generous for people who are less well off, or are they universal programs where most people or all people qualify regardless of their income or assets? And finally, income transfers vary in frequency from one-time distributions. For instance, everyone who got a Recovery Act payment during the pandemic got what was at the time more or less a one-time payment for that thing, versus an annual payment, such as the Earned Income Tax Credit or Alaska's dividend payment, or more frequent payments, commonly monthly. Lots of people who are interested in universal basic income and hadn't known about it for a very long time became fans of the idea when then presidential candidate Andrew Yang proposed a freedom dividend. And this is a kind of a common model for what we think of as guaranteed basic income. It is unconditional, it's universal. So he didn't predicate his idea for the freedom dividend on whether people were low income or whether they had to have certain types of activities that they were completed. And in his model, it was a $1,000 a month payment for all adults. So it was regular monthly payments. So hopefully this will give us a little bit of common knowledge. And now I'd like to move on to what, as a researcher, I technically refer to kind of the duh part of the presentation, which is how money matters. When I first was talking with the organizers here, I said, and then I can carefully review the literature that suggests that giving people money makes them better off. And I describe this as one of the tasks of researchers that's immediately obvious to everyone else that's out there. But in policy debates, it's not always immediately obvious. And there are a lot of reasons why you want to think about how and why money might matter, and even why we want to do this. I'll start with the why we want to do this. We have in 2021 America, the wealthiest society perhaps in history. Over the last 100 years, our economic system has created great wealth, has made a lot of people wealthy, but this has been distributed very, very unequally. And we still have high levels of poverty and perhaps higher levels of economic inequality than the US has ever seen. And this matters because people without money can't spend money on things. And it's all super stressful to not have money. And so when researchers talk about this, we often talk about money mattering because of the investments people can make and because of how it affects people psychologically and stress. A lot of my work involves thinking about families and children, and parental stress trickles down to children in a lot of ways. So when we want to show how money matters, we often look at adult outcomes. And these are some of the possible impacts of an income transfer program or a basic income program. Next slide, please. Okay. Researchers who look at basic income or other income transfer programs focus on perhaps 4 different areas where we might see changes in people's lives. A primary one, because this has often been studied by economists, is we want to look at how people's labor market behavior changes. Are people more or less likely to take jobs? Do their work hours change? as a result of getting a basic income grant. We're also concerned about family circumstances. Do poverty levels go down? Are families more likely to have adequate food? Are they more likely to be housed? Are they more likely to be housed in safe, healthy environments? Some of the measures of adult well-being that I talked about earlier, the stress and psychological functioning are things that we look at. And we can also look at a number of child outcomes. In the short run, families that receive income grants, their kids are often doing better in school. They have fewer problematic behaviors, more pro-social behaviors. You can see health outcomes and so on. So this kind of gives you an idea of the scope of minimum wage or of income transfer and basic income grants. So although Andrew Yang talked a lot about this, people were talking about income transfer programs and testing basic income ideas when Andrew Yang was still a kid. Let me check the dates there. I won't say whether he would have been in diapers or not at the time. But the US did a number of negative income tax experiments, they called it, a negative income tax with the idea that it would pay a benefit for families that didn't have any earnings. Interestingly, was tested in a lot of places, but the Seattle income maintenance experiment was one of the largest ones. These were experiments meant to test labor supply response. It did decrease hours slightly, and more so for married women, but it also had a lot of benefits for families. It reduced low birth weight births, improved nutrition. Interestingly and somewhat controversially, it seemed to initially have increased divorce, although this was interpreted as a mixed finding in that it might have meant that people were less likely to stay in relationships that were not good for the people involved. So another historic example that was somewhat more of a pure income transfer was the Canadian Minicom program that was run in Manitoba and in both in rural and urban Manitoba in the late 70s, and also had benefits for the families involved there. There are a number of current and ongoing experiments there. As an example of things you learn from your students, I have a doctoral student in my class this quarter who found an article on a new guaranteed benefit that's happening in Manitoba right now, a healthy baby prenatal benefit that provides a grant of about 1,000 Canadian a month for pregnant women. The student found an article about how it affected people enrolled in First Nations communities there, and that it showed that it reduced prenatal birth or reduced preterm birth outcomes and increased breastfeeding and early nutritional outcomes. A larger model research experiment under the way in a variety of US cities is the Baby's First Year program, which gives families $233 a month for the first 3-some years of a kid's life. They don't have a lot of findings out from that yet, but it's an interesting research team that includes an economist, a social welfare scholar, and a neuroscientist, really looking at the range of family outcomes. One well-known example here is the Stockton Economic Empowerment Demonstration, SEED, which provides $500 a month for families living in lower income neighborhoods. The recipients report being less depressed, feeling healthier, and interestingly, in terms of labor supply, are more likely to be working full-time. Another interesting thing about SEED, they recruited families through mailing letters out to households who live in low-income neighborhoods. And the respondents were disproportionately women. And the researchers decided that was probably because women open the envelopes when they arrive in their household. So that's an aside there. Another innovative program is in New York City right now, the Trust Youth Initiative. It only started this June. but it provides $1,250 a month for young adults experiencing homelessness as a way of getting youth on a positive plan. So in addition to some of the early outcomes I've talked about, there are a few lessons along the way as well. One is to involve early state policymakers well. This was a big lesson for Baby's first year. They reached out to policymakers in all of their states to make sure that when families were given income transfers, it would not affect their ability to qualify for other state programs. So it would not affect their ability to get food assistance or get childcare assistance. You don't want to destabilize people through doing this. Another great early lesson from these other programs was to involve the people who are likely recipients. The New York City example, which was designed in part by our national colleagues at Chapin Hall and University of Chicago, did a great job of involving youth in policy design around that. And finally, I have a self-serving plea for those who are thinking about doing this, which is to involve researchers. We're the ones who can show the impacts. We talk about taking basic income approaches because we want to change people's lives. We want to make people better off. And as a social policy researcher, I'm very interested in showing what makes people's lives better off. So that's my spiel. I'm really excited to hear what other folks have. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Jenny. Before we move on, I would love to, we have about 2 or 3 minutes. If anyone has any questions for Jenny, you can come off mute real quick and ask your question, or you can put it in the chat. We have just a second to do that. And then we will move along. Does anyone have any questions for Jenny?
So Marcy, I suspect I either answered everybody's question or I spoke so fast that people couldn't really understand what I was saying. So
I think we should go with option. I think we should go with option. Oh, somebody had a question. I was going to say option A.
Great. Her question is there a level of income that becomes a game changer or even small amounts helpful? That's a great question. And one I think is probably worthy of some cross-study research. My sense is that there is kind of a linear relationship here where more money helps more, and small amounts get folded in to the point where they're not as noticeable. But I think that is a good question, particularly for state level or county level programs, which might not have as much of a budget. And then Bob Cooper had a question about expanded unemployment payments. I know more about the recently expanded child tax credit, which operates in some ways like a basic income. It's providing families with up to $250 or $300 a month. And it has had really fast results on family food insecurity. This is one of the things that the Census Pulse survey measures. So it's unlike many poverty measurements where we get surveys once a year and it takes an additional year to get it out. The Census Pulse is weekly. It has enough of a sample size so you can figure out what's going on nationally. And child poverty has dropped and food insecurity has dropped. So I think that shows, particularly even in the context of the pandemic, that these things work well. And then Lori had a question about timeline that seems more and less effective. I think there's a big difference between monthly and annual payments. They get used for different things. Monthly payments help families meet basic needs and budgets. Annual payments tend to be used more for things like reducing debt, purchasing assets, and so on. And Marcy, now I see that we're getting a lot of questions, but I don't want to spend too much time. I don't want to get us too far off the schedule. I can answer some of these in the chat myself, and hopefully we'll have some more time at the end as well.
Okay, that sounds good. Thank you. And thank you all for your questions. I think, again, you're welcome to add them. And before we move on to Dr. Aisha Yandoro, I realized in my excitement to get you all listening to amazing speakers that I completely neglected the land acknowledgement part, which feels like it just feels like such a classic thing that we're trying to avoid by adding land acknowledgements. And so I would just like to pause us all very quickly and acknowledge that I and the rest of the Poverty Action staff are joining this webinar today from Seattle, and we are on the traditional land of the First People of Seattle, the Duwamish people past and present, and honor with gratitude the land itself and the Duwamish tribe. I think many of you know that these land acknowledgement is not a new practice, but doing it now is a simple way of resisting the erasure of Indigenous histories and working toward honoring and inviting the truth. So with my sincere apologies for not having started our meeting that way, I wanted to be sure we didn't lose the thread of that before we continued. So I am going to add in the chat really quickly an opportunity to check out whose traditional land you're on today, and I invite you to add whose land you're on to the chat throughout the presentation, while of course listening to our presenters. So I will add that to the chat in just 1 second, but in the meantime, I am thrilled and honored to that we have Dr. Aisha Yandoro joining us today from the Magnolias Mothers Trust in Jackson, Mississippi, and it is, I have heard her speak before, and you all are in for an amazing treat. Not to pressure you, Dr. Yandoro, but we are excited to have you. So I'm going to put myself on mute and turn it over to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Marcy. And slides should have been sent to someone. Perfect. Thank you. Look at that. Things just magically work out. As Marcy said, I am Dr. Aisha Yandoro. I am the Chief Executive Officer of Springboard to Opportunities. Springboard provides programs and services for families that live in federally subsidized affordable housing. We pride ourselves on taking a radically resident-driven approach to our work. And because of that, in 2018, we launched the Magnolia Mothers Trust, which was the first guaranteed income project in this country that centers the needs of extremely low-income Black mothers into the conversation around equity and economic liberation. Next slide. What we know is that, we just had all of the lovely data, and there's all of these other researchers who will provide data, but what we know is that a minimum wage job does not provide enough income to support a family. We have been under the backdrop of COVID for the last 20 months, and time again, we have heard families say that they did not have enough money to meet their ends meet, not only now, but prior to the pandemic, we were hearing families tell us that they did not have enough income to meet their basic needs or to dream. And so we decided that we could address those issues. We could go about addressing the issues within our social safety net and center the needs of families into the conversation and make it where it's not stressful, dehumanizing, and time consuming for families to actually receive the financial resources that it is that they need to survive and thrive in this country. Next slide, please. What we're doing. The Magnolia Mothers Trust has been around since 2018. Like I said, we were the first to launch. We launched a month or so before SEED. Since we started in 2018, we have supported 220 Black women that live in Black mothers, that live in federally subsidized affordable housing with the guaranteed income. We also take a 2-generation approach by opening children's savings accounts or 529 accounts for each one of the kids of the moms involved in Magnolia Mothers Trust. And we see those accounts with $1,000 a month. We pride ourselves on the fact that it is all about agency and dignity and trusting the women that we know that we work with, that they know best what it is that they want for themselves and their families. And we just need to trust them and get out of their way so that they can go about doing all the things that they need. Next slide, please. Currently, this year, we are providing $100, $1,000 a month, 12 months. So that's $12,000 annually. In the previous session, someone said, okay, well, how much is too much? How much isn't enough? And that question wasn't for me, but I want to answer it because I get it a lot. And I think that for those of us who do not live in poverty or extreme poverty, we underestimate how small amounts of money can have significant impacts. So for the women that we work with, we are on average doubling their income. The women that we work with make about $11,400 annually. Take that in context. We are in Mississippi where our federal minimum wage is still $7.25 an hour. And so we have individuals who are working, but we are not providing them with a salary that allows them to actually live, let alone thrive. And so with the Magnolia Mothers Trust, we are spinning the ideal of deservingness on its head. And we are saying that, you know what? You don't need another service. You don't need another program. And I run an organization where we are all about service provision, y'all. So I get it. But we are simply saying we're going to trust you and see what happens. Next slide, please. So we've been doing this work for a while now. We have a robust evaluation design and we work with an external evaluator. We are seeing all of the pieces that we see when we give individuals cash. Moms are able to pay their bills on time. They're able to save up for emergencies. They're able to pay for food for their families. They're able to get out of debt. They're able to move into home ownership. Y'all, fun fact. Like I said, we started in 2018. So our first cohort of moms, there were 20 moms in that first cohort, all living in affordable housing. I was talking to them last week because we're in the process of doing some retrospective evaluation pieces. Out of those 20 women that first year, 18 of them have moved out of affordable housing and they're either now in market rate apartments or they have moved into home ownership opportunities. So that's just a small piece of the power of cash. But I always tell people, I'm like, you know, what it is that we're seeing that people are actually able to purchase and do, that's fun, that's exciting, that's sexy, but it's the least sexy part of cash to me. And I'm really excited about the conversations that we hear with moms when they say that they're able to show up differently in their lives, that they have joy for the first time. One of our moms a couple of months ago, when I was talking to her about, okay, what is it that you want to do now? And, you know, what are your plans? And she was like, for the first time, I actually realized I can plan and that my dreams do not automatically have to be interconnected to my kids' dreams, or that I am allowed to have dreams beyond what it is that I want for my kids. And so those are the pieces that we see. And those are the pieces that I don't feel that we have enough conversations about, how cash allows you to show up differently in your own lives. Yes, it allows you to participate in consumer sovereignty and the capitalistic pieces of it, but it allows you to breathe, it allows you the dignity, it allows you the opportunity to stop, think, and plan. And that's really significant when you are living a life of cash scarcity in a lot of instances. Next slide, please. Also, what it is that we're seeing beyond the numbers is that moms always emphasize the importance of their kids' education. We see that moms have actually had the ability to increase in having health insurance, which is really significant, especially in Mississippi, where we do not have Medicare expansion. We see where moms report that they can actually choose jobs with more flexible hours and engage in self-care and prepare for their future, all which has been very important over the last 20 months. And we also are seeing a significant increase in moms who are able to get gas when needed, have car insurance, and own a vehicle. All important when we're talking about economic mobility and ability for families to move forward. Next slide, please. Just a couple of quotes, because I always like to make sure that I am bringing the women into the conversations, because I am just the vehicle by which the work flows through, but it is not my work. One of my moms said that it gave me the opportunity to be able to do what I wanted to do for my child. It made me feel whole as a mother. Another one of our mothers said, the Magnolia Mothers Trust has taken care of me. If I didn't have this, I'd be forced to take anything to make it. It's all about the agency and the trust and the dignity for us, y'all. Why this matters. The Magnolia Mothers Trust stands in direct contrast to the deeply stigmatized experience of receiving benefits through traditional welfare policies, which has been shown to erode trust, suppressing civic and political engagement. for far too long, we have leaned into these culture lifts and these narratives that are just wrong. They're false. And they have guided our country's social welfare with policies. It is time for us to actually have the stories and wisdom of the women most affected by these policies to be put on center stage. It is time that we change the narrator by changing the narrative, and changing the narrative by changing the narrator. And that's really what so much of our work is about as it relates to guaranteed income. When we started this work in 2018, we had 3 fundamental goals. We wanted to change the way that we go about talking about poverty in this country and really changing how we view Black women in poverty in this country. We wanted to go about changing the way women view themselves. So many times what we see with this false narrative that it ends up being self-fulfilling prophecies, and that women assume these narratives that are not theirs, that have been written for them. So we really wanted to allow our moms to take their power back, own their voices, own their narratives, and recognize that, you know what, I am not this thing that society keeps telling me that I am. So that was the second goal. And the third goal, y'all, was to straight up liberate capital, to give money to families, to individuals who in so many instances have been harmed by our current welfare systems and have been set aside where they are not receiving the financial resources necessary because of the systems and policies that we not only put in place, but that we allow to perpetuate it. Next slide. Oh, y'all, I ran through that because I wanted to leave some time for questions. So if there are no questions, I'm good. I did not want to duplicate things that I've said before because y'all, I talk a whole lot. So you probably have heard me talk before, but I stay on brand. And so, yeah, I'll take questions if there are any questions. And if not, I yield my time to whoever's next. Thank you for having me. So, have I looked at the impact of yes, we have. Okay, now the questions are coming and y'all are going so fast I can't keep up. So for the families that we work with, like I said, on average, it's less than $12,000 in federally subsidized affordable housing. So all of our families are impacted by the benefits and social safety net. We did $1,000 a month when we started this work intentionally, because when we started, we did not have a proof of concept. There was no one else working with a population as low income as ours. So we really took a hypothesis of, okay, $1,000 would be enough to make sure that we are doing good without doing harm. And our data has shown that on average, our moms have about $300 to $400 each month that they have a decrease in their actual benefits. But by and large, our moms tell us that even though they have the $300 to $400 reduction in benefits, it is a clear, it's still worth it because they have the $600 to $700 is all cash, which is net benefit that they can use however they want. It's not a voucher, it's a subsidy. Question about when I say mothers. Mothers for us is anyone who actually is head of household within the affordable housing communities that we work in. So 18 to having a kid that is under the age of 18. So on average, our moms are typically between the ages of 25 and 40 that we work with. And that's really based on the demographics within the communities. Where does your funding come from? Blood, sweat, and tears. A whole lot of blood, sweat, and tears, y'all. Are there tax consequences? Oh, excellent question, Lisa. Actually, there are tax consequences, but it's actually a benefit because this is actually considered income. So you get to report this on your earned income tax credit. So we have seen in subsequent years, and I'm sure we'll see now with the child tax credit, that moms are actually receiving whatever it else that they may have had a reduction in benefit, they're actually receiving it back during tax season because it's considered income and they get to report and reflect it. Is it, oh, they're going too fast. I can't keep up, Marcy. Hold on.
Do you want me to, I'm happy to, there's several questions about funding, which I hear you on blood, sweat, and tears. There's a question about single fathers. I will compile these for you. I got you.
Thank you.
So yeah, no problem. Yep, are single fathers considered as one of the questions?
Our work is Magnolia Mothers Trust. There are pilots coming out, and I think a few of them actually do center fathers, but I am fully on brand and operating in purpose, and my jam is Black women. And that is really because when we look at the data, specifically in this region, when we show those who have been most left out of opportunities for equity and economic liberation because of our policies and systems, it has been poor mothers, poor Black mothers specifically. So that is the space that we operate in. really leaning into the idea that if you support those who have been most harmed, that we all are supported, and that the tide rises for all of us.
Amazing, thank you. How are moms involved in the design, the program design? And if I should say, I don't want to minimize this. I hope you have a chance to scroll through it. There's boatloads of gratitude for your amazing work in this presentation coming through. So I don't want to minimize that. But the next question is, how are moms involved in the program design?
Yeah, no, thank you for that. So I run an organization that's radically resident driven. Moms are involved in every aspect of our work. When we were dreaming about the Magnolia Mothers Trust way in 2017, before we had a name, before we had a concept, before we had any money to do this work, it really was talking to moms about, okay, if we were to give you cash, what would that look like? I had 6 months worth of dreaming sessions with moms where they just came and sat and had lunch with me. And I think that's the piece also that we don't talk enough about, the power of relationships, that even when you don't have a thing, if you have really good relationships, people trust you enough to know that whatever it is that you say you're going to do, that you will do, and it won't cause them harm. And so we had the benefit of that. So for 6 months, moms just sat around and redreamed about what this could be, what it should be, what it should not be. And that's where it came from. And we are in the process of preparing for our 4th year, which will be next year, our 4th iteration. And we are, revisiting and redreaming with moms about what, if any, changes we should make if we go into the 4th year, using the learnings from the first 3 years. So we are having focus groups with our various cohorts of moms to saying, okay, what hasn't been great? What has been great? Oh, we're great. Y'all are great. What should we add? What should we take away? So we have a constant communication feedback channels where our moms are sharing with us anything that's not working, anything that is working, and we are very serious about that. I tell folks all the time, not my work, this is the mama's works. I am just fortunate enough to get to be the person to put it all out there into the world.
Amazing. Any data or qualitative experience that this reduces the adolescents from becoming homeless or street involved?
No data as it relates to harmless and street involved. We do have significant data about how this supports the kids and how it supports the kids not only in being able to see their mom show up differently and how they are getting to see their mom happy for the first time and less stress, but then also how it's supporting the kids and thinking about planning for their future and what is actually possible with their lives. But as far as homelessness or street involved, that's not a part of our research to date.
Thank you. The piece around dreaming, changing narratives, ability to plan is so powerful. What storytelling strategies are you employing to help change these narratives or help capture these narratives?
Yeah, we have a couple. So we launched the Storytelling Lab earlier this year. Y'all, time is so fluid. I'm sorry. I'm like, what year was that? We launched the Storytelling Lab sometime within the last 2 years, where it really was about how do we go about making sure that we're centering moms in these conversations and making sure that they have the support necessary. And so that includes making sure that our moms understand advocacy and policy and are trained in doing that. Our moms have been at the forefront of a lot of the conversations around the child tax credit and expansion that, and have actually been involved in White House conversations. We have made sure that our moms are trained in doing speaking as it relates to live interviews. We have an entire project with Ms. Magazine called Front and Center, where twice a month I've asked that our moms write in their own voices, just light editing, but no restructuring, where those are published by Ms. Magazine on their platform. So it really is about creating opportunities for us to infuse various conversations into the conversation around poverty, recognizing that we're not all a monolith, recognizing that our moms have very different challenges that they are focusing on, and it's really allowing us to see them in their full beauty and power. I mean, I think the narrative work is really, all of it's my jam, but I think a lot of the narrative pieces are some of my favorite parts of our work and some of the parts that I have the most fortune of being able to see and being a part of, because it is so beautiful when you have individuals get to see themselves for the first time and get to see themselves in a way that you've always seen them, but that they haven't been able to see themselves that way because they've had to claw through all of the rhetoric and claw through all of the muck that is constantly out there telling them what it is that they are and what it is that they're capable of accomplishing. So when we're able just to tear back all of that foolishness and those layers and say, okay, here is what I've always seen you to be and what I've always known about you, and our moms actually see themselves and get to meet themselves for the first time. Y'all, if I don't do anything else, I've done my job. It's good stuff. Good stuff.
I could, speaking only for myself, but I know people's cameras are off so that we're only looking at you. And I'm sure that if I am any indication, there's a lot of head nodding happening right now as you speak. So there's a couple questions that are related to 529s and child savings accounts. So is there an end date for the money that the mom gets?
Yeah, so the end date, the end date is 12 months. So whenever and how we start, really, the month that we start always differs because we usually give ourselves at least 2 months grace period to breathe, look at the data, and prepare for the next rollout. Because y'all, just for the record too, it takes a lot of work to give money away. We have not talked about that. It takes a whole lot of work to give money away. I'm gonna say that one more time. It takes a whole lot of work to give money away. So make sure that you have the internal structure and capacities in place whenever you go on this journey. So so it's 12 months from whenever we launch until the end date. The 529s accounts that we set up, we seed with $1,000 for each one of our kids, of our moms, and we do those in interest-bearing accounts through our state partners here. We used to do children's savings accounts when we first started, but as we've grown over the years and when we were actually putting in more money, we decided it makes more sense to actually have them in interest-bearing accounts so that our moms are, a couple of reasons, so that our moms are actually learning the system and understanding how the system and process works, and then also so it allows them to earn wealth at a greater capacity than you will be able to with a children's savings account.
Great, thank you. The one follow-up on that is, are there monthly deposits in the 529 made just during the year the parents receive the pilot, or does it extend beyond that?
So the 529s are not monthly. That's a one-time $1,000. The Magnolia Mothers Trust, I think that's a good question. I should make sure I clarify that because y'all just think I'm out here liberating all the capital. Y'all, I wish. So the 529 is a one-time $1,000 per kid that we put into the 529 account. The monthly Magnolia Mothers Trust, we do put that into a checking account, and our moms get to dictate what their checking account is. So when we first started, we went about establishing a partnership with our local federal credit union to ensure that our moms could have access to accounts that did not have any fees associated with it, where they would actually have access to using the ATM and all of that without fees, and be able to write checks, because we really did want to make sure that our moms were establishing banking relationships with banks, because so many of our moms unfortunately had been sucked into predatory lenders and into that world. And so we really did want to begin to put in place healthy banking practices. So we have a partnership with our local federal credit union where our moms can set up accounts if they don't have banking relationships. But a lot of our moms also use Chime and different things as well as their banking partner. But that is something that we make sure that they have. And let me say this one thing too about predatory lenders. So our first year, well, not so much the second year, but our first year when we looked at this data, we were seeing that moms were getting out of debt, and we was like, okay, well, what kind of debt? Y'all, it was all predatory debt. It was from payday lending or for-profit colleges that our moms had amassed debt. So, the first year there was over $10,000 worth of predatory debt that our moms collectively paid back. And that was with 20 people. So our first year was 20 moms. It wasn't 100 moms. It wasn't the 110 that we had last year. There was 20 moms that collectively the first year paid off over $10,000 worth of predatory debt. So when we talk about systems and policies that are in play that are designed to take advantage of poor people, there it is right there.
Wow, absolutely. I know we are coming up on time for you, but I think there's two questions about whether the moms meet as a cohort to share experiences and impacts that they've experienced.
They
Can
do.
you talk
So
a little bit about that? Okay.
yeah, so not so much this year, y'all, because it's been COVID, and Mississippi is on a whole other path when it comes to COVID. But we do have monthly gatherings that we do via Zoom. We have a chat group, GroupMe. I picked up my phone, but you can't see it. But we have a GroupMe chat group where the moms connect all the time and different things. But we have monthly gatherings via Zoom that moms can opt into. We'll be holding our first in-person event for the last few months here in October. We're doing a trunk or treat for the kids, which will be outside and fun and those things, because it is a big piece too that our moms have said that they really love. It's the building of community. And, we don't talk enough. I have said we don't talk about enough a lot, y'all. We've got to have different conversations, clearly. But anyway, we don't talk enough about the social isolation of poverty. So, we see individuals living in these apartment complexes, so we just automatically assume that that's community. What it is that we've learned over the last 2 years is that no, that's not community. That's just proximity. That's just someone who lives next to me. And so our moms have really talked about how having the community and actually knowing that there are other individuals whose stories are really similar to theirs is beautiful. And it makes it so where it's not isolating. True story. So right before COVID hit, y'all, February 2020, we had a women's gathering, for lack of a better word. It was like a conference, 2-day conference coming together where our moms could do leadership and rest and mindfulness and just whatever. And it was right before COVID hit, and then everything shut down. And some of our moms who were at that event, as we've been collecting data and stories as we're preparing for next year, have talked about how that event is what sustained them during the pandemic, because women that they met at that event became their really good friends. And those friendships are what kept them through, because they realized that they weren't alone, that they weren't the only ones who had lost their jobs. They weren't the only ones who were struggling emotionally. So we put a lot of investments into building community as well, because we are a community-based organization that's connected to being radically resident-driven, and also because I know that nothing that we are able to do with the Magnolia Mothers Trust would be possible without the women and the pioneers who worked with me in designing this program way back in 2017 when it was just an idea. So yeah.
So that's so beautiful. Thank you. I think, I know we're running up on time. I think one other question that a few people had was about any data on how this affects people with disabilities. Was that part of the group?
So individuals are able to opt in. Most of the families that we work with are not on disability, and that's simply because we want moms to have the agency to make a determination about whether or not this opportunity is one for them. And we know that for families who have disability, if they lose that disability, or if that disability is impacted in any shape, form, or fashion, it could take years to get it back. So individuals who are on, who receive disability checks have not opted in to participate in the Magnolia Mothers Trust to date. So that's not data that we have.
Okay, I'm going to scroll through because I think this one will be interesting for everyone. What are some of your biggest lessons learned about giving away money? Things that you wish you knew then that you know now. Clearly, one of them is giving money away is difficult. You said that one.
It's so hard. So I'm trying to figure out how to answer this because there are so many lessons learned. I think my biggest lesson, and this is, I like to end on positive notes, so I'm gonna say this and then I'm gonna end positively. How about that? I think my biggest lesson was way back in 2018 when we started this work. I really was naive enough to believe that all we needed was a proof of concept. And once individuals began to see that, oh, you actually can trust people and you actually can trust Black mothers in poverty and give them money. I was really naive enough to believe that it would make the fundraising a lot easier. And the reality is that our racism and sexism within this country is very deep, and how we view poor Black women in this country is a very value misalignment that it is going to take a lot more than just a proof of concept regarding guaranteed income for us to move away from. So that was the biggest lesson learned, that I really thought that, we got our 20 mamas, we did that. I was like, yes, the manna will flow from heaven and it will be great. Manna didn't quite flow from heaven. So that was the biggest lesson learned. But I will say on the positive, since I have to end on the positive, I will say that I would do it all over, and I would do it exactly the way that it was done, because we have demonstrated what is possible when you tap into radical imagination, when you do not let individuals tell you that you cannot do a thing. Because that was the thing too, a lot of folks told me that I couldn't do this. And a lot of folks told us that we should not do this because the population that we were working with was too poor to be helped, which I felt was I know it is an asinine ideal, and it's a very harmful narrative that we can just be comfortable in this country writing off an entire swath of our population. And so I am very pleased and proud that we said, we actually are going to, do what it is that our families are telling us that it is that they need. We are going to trust them. We're going to trust ourselves, and we're going to put it all on red. And that's what we did. And so here we are now, and doing this work successfully for the last 3 years. So we have had a significant impact on not only the 220 families that we have directly impacted, but the thousands upon thousands of families who are connected to guaranteed income projects within this country. There are over 100 pilots of guaranteed income in some form or iteration in this country being rolled out or designed or implemented. That would not have happened had it not been for Magnolia Mothers Trust and Seed, and the pioneer individuals who said, okay, I'm gonna trust y'all that you say you're gonna give me money and it won't harm, and I can go out and live my dreams. So yeah, so I say that's been the biggest lesson. When people tell you can't do something, shake the haters off and do it anyway, and trust it. I always bet on community.
Oh my goodness, that was an amazing way to end. I hope you have a minute to scroll through all of the gratitude and kind words that have come in through the chat. Thank you so much
thank y'all so much, and thank you for the invitation. I have friends on here, so thanks friends for the invite. Y'all are doing amazing work, and this is very, very impressive that you have over 100 individuals tapped in and have a conversation about guaranteed income in Washington State. So hats off, salute to that. Yeah.
Amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, I told you all were in for a treat with her joining us, and I think you're in for another treat coming right up. So now I am thrilled to introduce Heather Hayes, who is with the New Leaf Project in Vancouver, British Columbia, and she will be walking through her work and that project with you all now. So take it away, Heather. Thank you all.
Yeah, thanks very much, and I'm very excited to be here today. Wow, what an act to follow. But very common themes that are emerging in the States that are also emerging here in Canada across our project. So thanks very much, Aisha and Jenny. And I'll get started on my presentation. I'm Heather Hay, and I'm the CEO and Chief Operating Officer of a charitable organization called Foundations for Social Change. And what we do is address complex social problems through the collection of scientific evidence. And what we try to do is move our projects that have promising results through to policy change. And I'm here today to talk about a pilot project that we launched in 2018 called the New Leaf Pilot Project. And it basically is the delivery of unconditional cash transfers to individuals that are living homeless. So this is Catherine, and she's gonna be here with us on our journey, because her biggest message to everybody that's involved in this work is believe in me. And what we've learned basically is that when you believe in individuals, they actually know what is best for them and what to do for them to end homelessness, to move them out of poverty, to provide hope, to be engaged in community again. And so in my presentation, I'll bring Catherine along with us as we move forward in the slides. You could, next slide, and next slide, please. So the Newly pilot project was launched in 2018. And as I said, it was the delivery of unconditional, one-time only cash transfers of $11,500 Canadian to a cohort of individuals or a subpopulation of individuals who were living homeless. We also provided some wraparound services, which included coaching and workshops in order to support individuals in their process. We landed on the $7,500 just to respond to, I think, one of the questions about the amount of money, because that's in totality what a homeless person receives from welfare in a year here in Canada. And so we thought that was a good lump sum, and it basically doubled their income. We worked with our partners in the provincial government to ensure that the welfare payments or the disability payments that people were actually accessing were not compromised if they should receive the additional $7,500 cash transfers. So we were successful in getting government support around that. And also, I think what we've learned from our lived experience panel or the participants that were involved in the project is that it's very expensive to move out of homelessness. And so although people were giving welfare or on disabilities, it just wasn't enough to be able to save, to be able to pay for last month's and first month's rent, to be able to reestablish utilities, and to be able to move forward. Next slide, please. Yeah, so we had conducted with our partners at University of British Columbia a randomized control trial. And it was very small. The pilot was only 50 people, 46 basically overall. And in the first cohort were the cash cohort, and then, well, we actually had 4 cohorts. Those 2 cash and 2 non-cash cohorts. And where the changes were is who received coaching, who received workshops, and what the wraparound services looked like. In our additional resources that we actually provided, everybody received a telephone, and those telephones were provided by TELUS, which is a major phone company here in Canada. We also supported people in getting ID replacement, because what we know is a lot of people who are living homeless don't have identification. For the collection of our data and for the points in time for collecting our data, all the individuals, for however often we met with them, they were paid a $20 to $30 honorarium depending on time. We provided a resource booklet for individuals for what are the resources that I need in order to help me to gain food security or move through to find housing or to look for primary care sites or medical clinics that are close to me. Next slide, please. I wanted to spend a little bit of time about identifying our population. And I think our population in Canada looks a little different than the population in the States. So for 2 reasons. One is we have universal health access. So I think access to healthcare services for our homeless population is readily available. So I think the overall health and wellness of individuals probably a little higher. And secondly, we don't have a large veterans population that may be defaulting to the street. But when we move forward in this project, because it was so controversial, we had to be really clear on who the subpopulation was that we were actually working with in order to provide this unconditional cash transfer. And with support of ethics, our ethics committee at University of British Columbia, we decided on focusing on a subpopulation of individuals who did not have complex mental health problems and did not have or misuse drugs. Also, individuals who are more recently homeless. So our thinking around that was that we really wanted people to be compass mentis to make the best informed decision as they could. recognizing that those other subpopulations may also do very well in receiving unconditional cash transfers. But I think, first of all, we just wanted to make sure that we were more or less working with a population that was precariously housed, that was newly homeless, that wasn't encumbered with significant health issues and drug issues. Our cohort was 19 to 65 years of age, and the length of time homeless was 2 calendar years or less. One of the other criteria was we needed to ensure that individuals had Canadian citizenship or they were a permanent resident of Canada. Next slide, please. So in total, we had 115 participants who were successfully enrolled in the study. The population, the gender mix was, we had 58% males and 40% females. And actually the overall profile of the population mirrored much of who our current population is here in Vancouver. Although we did find that we had an underrepresentation of Indigenous, our Indigenous community, because the Indigenous people who are homeless and on the street are actually overrepresented in the homeless population overall. In the pilot project, our participants, actually their average length of homelessness was approximately 6 months. 24% had no personal ID, and there was a 28% rate of employment. And that was interesting because actually most of our participants had not only one job, but 1 or 2 or 3 jobs. And the reason why they became homeless is because they actually lost one of those jobs, or they became rent evicted with gentrification that's happening here. But many of the reasons why people ended on the street was just, it was like the last straw. They were living so close to the edge that it was just one more thing that kind of tipped the burden, and they defaulted to the street. Okay, next slide, and next slide, you can go past. Yeah. So what we found was, actually, if you could go to the next slide, that would be great. Yeah, our outcome measures. So what we found was people who received cash moved into housing significantly faster than those who did not receive the cash. People were able to save more money, and their spending was actually spent on things that they thought was important to them. So although every individual was homeless, many of them chose not to actually move into housing. Some of them actually chose to do other things. So for example, some of our mothers actually bought cars so they could be able to have transportation to go back and forth to their work. We had a young mother who was actually pregnant and living on the street. She wanted to be reunited with her family who was living in Saskatchewan. She spent her money on purchasing an airplane ticket in order to be reunited to extended family. And she's been working with us over time now on our lived experience panel. And she's done very well and has been sustained in her home community. She's back at work and reunited with her 3 other children. What we also found is that there was a higher level of food security with those that received cash. And also there was a significant increase in executive function. That meaning that people's ability to problem solve and to be clear on what they wanted actually improved. And that we saw trending signals around just feelings of well-being and more social connectedness. People were able to move into employment or keep their employment that they had. And their understanding of how they perceived their health was better. Although we didn't have individuals who had complex mental health issues, what we know is that a large majority of the homeless population are suffering with PTSD, have low levels of depression, and have significant sense of hopelessness. So next slide, please. When we take a look at food security, for example, we saw the food security increase from 31% to 65% after 1 month of receiving the cash transfer. Next slide, please. One of the significant findings that we found in the pilot was there's a decrease of 39% of expenditures on temptation goods. So there has been a significant reduction in spending on goods such as alcohol, cigarettes, or drugs. And I think, going back to Aisha's point, is that one of the things that the pilot project actually identified for us is it challenges mental models that people have with individuals who may be living in poverty, and how they will expend their money, and how accountable they are for their money, and the capacities they have to be able to spend money which actually supports them in the way that they think is beneficial for themselves. Next slide, please. Executive control. I think I spoke briefly about this, but the executive function increased 13 percentage points by 3 months, really by after receiving the cash. So really that just kind of demonstrates that people are becoming, moving out of crisis mode and into a place more of stabilization as they move forward and restabilize their lives from the street into housing or into areas where they thought were most effective for their lifestyle. One of the other outcomes that we saw is there was a cost benefit overall on the services. So what we saw is that individuals who did receive the cash actually spent less money on health, less money on shelter. We spent less money on shelter services of care, and individuals accessed healthcare services in a reduced way. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. This is Ray. I'm not really sure if we can actually run the video for him, but he was one of our clients that, are we able to do that, do you think? No?
Hi, yeah, I think that we can. Let me just switch over the part of the
Okay.
screen I'm sharing.
Yeah.
I think the sound is not coming
Yeah,
through for many of
through.
us.
Yeah. Well, we can skip that for a time. I just, I can make that available for people as we move forward.
I have captions. Anybody else not have captions? Because that was,
I could see the captions.
yeah, it was amazing where we were going with that.
Okay, so I'll make sure that we can get that video out to you to circulate, or did you want to start it again?
It said it was on YouTube, so we could just get a link. That would be good.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
I think I saw Leanna. This is Marcy again. I think I saw Leanna copy and paste. There it is, straight into the
Okay.
chat. So be sure to click on that before you close out your Zoom window at the end of this presentation, because it will disappear.
Okay.
So go ahead, Heather.
Okay, great. Thanks. Sorry for that, everyone. So So accelerating impact, one of the things obviously that we found was that there's no one size fits all solution for homelessness, nor is a homeless person a homeless person a homeless person, but there are significant subpopulations who rest within our homeless population. We were working with actually one of the most impoverished people in Canada's most expensive city with the highest rents and the lowest vacancy. And even so, our cash transfers increased housing stability, money management, spending, food security, and executive function. And I think one of the things that we wanted to actually share is that it does really, this project, I think, really demonstrated the value of meaningful risk taking. And similar to Ayesha, I think we had a lot of blowback around, oh, this is never going to happen. What are you guys doing? Are you crazy? You're giving direct transfers to people with no conditions. So I think there was a lot of, as I said, mental models that were kind of deconstructed in the process. And as we move forward, could I have the second slide, please? Yeah. Next one. Yeah. As we move forward, we're planning for launch in November is the New Leaf project expansion in Vancouver. And we're also working together with the City of Toronto. And what we're trying to do is actually take the learnings from the pilot project, which had promising results, but also had a number of learnings that we needed to kind of integrate into this second project to move forward. We're hoping to launch in January, and what we'll be looking at is a total of 200 individuals who will receive unconditional cash transfers of $8,500. And why we've changed the dollar figure is because our welfare rates have gone up here in Canada. And we're only going to do two conditions. One is a non-cash and one is a cash. And we'll have 200 individuals as well who will receive the non-cash. What we're hoping over time, if we raise enough money through fundraising, that when we're completed the project and if we have positive outcomes, then the non-cash group will also receive direct cash payments. One of the things that we learned from the pilot and in working with our lived experience panel is connection is really important. And although we had researchers that were collecting the data, actually those researchers in the field provided an amazing relationship to our participants as we move forward. So in the expansion project, we've developed a new role of community connectors that will be following our participants over the 12-month period of time and actually be working with them around collecting their stories through qualitative narrative inquiry, through a storytelling process, but as well be available for them around the clock in order to be able to continue to develop relationship and to be there for them. The other thing that we've actually done is that we've created an app so that the app will go on the telephone for all of our participants, and the app will help the individuals to wayfind through the services, also to be able to document their experience and to be able to work with the researchers in completing their forms. But although we're actually following the principles of JEDI, we also had to develop a paper and pencil process for those individuals who may not have availability or have the skill set to actually be able to use the app or are computer literate. So our project objective is to evaluate the impact again of unconditional cash transfers on people who are living in Toronto and in Vancouver. And one of the reasons why we've started to launch this project is because we really wanted to be able to generalize our results. And our pilot population, our sample size was too small. So we're hoping now as we move forward that we'll collect enough data to be able to move forward in developing an impact on policy development here at the federal government level. So that's it for me. And I certainly will take any questions if anyone has any questions or concerns. And thank you very much for having us and inviting us to your process.
Thank you so much, Heather. Such good information. Okay, we are running a little short on time, but I think we probably have time for about 2 questions for Heather. I don't want to shortchange Megan, but I think we have a couple questions. Heather, are you okay reading the chat, or would you like me to read them to you?
No, that's fine. I think the first question was, could you speak a little bit about the measurement of what people purchased? How were those measures developed, and speak about your process in developing those measures? Basically, we collected the individuals from the, we collected the measurements from the individuals through interview guides. So along the way, when we collected our data, the researchers that were assigned to sub-cohorts of the participants actually asked individuals through a series of questions how they spent the money. So we didn't actually track them, or we didn't have, we actually relied on individuals to share with us how their dollars were spent. We had free access to checking accounts through a banking organization here in Vancouver, and we deposited the money there. Individuals could transfer that money out if they wanted to their own banking facilities, but we didn't actually follow the money flow. We developed a relationship, and we asked individuals through our interview processes how they spent the money. I will actually send to the group. The next question was, how did you measure the increase in executive function? And I can actually send to the organizers here the format and the executive function criteria that we use, so I can make that available for you. The next question was, were you able to identify any findings specific to identity points, e.g. young people who are pairing those with employment when they first started? You know, not specifically. So I think in the expansion project, that is definitely some of the areas that we're looking at. What we have done in the expansion project is we've lowered the age to 18 and we've increased it to 65 just in order to represent some of the replication that's happening here in Vancouver around our homeless population. What we're finding is that our homeless population is aging, and there's a significant increase in cohort of individuals who are seniors who are homeless. So if you want actually more details on our outcomes, I can actually provide the impact report with the detailed research activities in them, if that would be more helpful. I can also provide that to the organizers.
I think in the interest of time, we are probably going to have to go that route. Thank you so much, Heather, for being here, for your amazing work, for all the successes, and congratulations on the successes so far. Thank you so much for sharing this with us here.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, and I will do a couple other mini housekeeping reminders and say, you know, we are recording this. I hope that's okay with everybody. That started before you all joined, and we will get this out as soon as possible if you want to go back and kind of read through, listen to stuff that people said. So without further ado, I will turn it over to Megan Matthews from DSHS with the Economic Services Administration. She's part of the Poverty Reduction Work Group team, and we are thrilled to have her here. Thank you so much, Megan. I'll turn it over to you.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much. I'm glad we're short on time because what I have to say is really short. And I also just want to allow that if there are things that you want to learn more about, you can please feel free to reach out to us. We're happy to have more conversation. And some of you on the call might have heard some of this already. So, okay, next slide, please. Okay, so I don't know why. Okay, so the budget proviso for the basic income feasibility study set aside $77,000 for the Department of Social and Health Services and the Economic Service Administration and the Governor's Poverty Reduction Work Group to conduct a basic income feasibility study. The required components of this study are a literature review, a plan design for Washington State, a cost benefit analysis, operational costs, and an implementation plan. This is all due to the legislature by June 1st, 2022. Next slide, please. Thank you. The idea of basic income is aligned with two of the recommendations from the governor's 10-year plan for a just and equitable Washington. That is recommendation 6D, making cash assistance unconditional, and then recommendation 8D, developing a guaranteed basic income program. Next slide, please. This is our working timeline. Sharing power and partnering with the community is the value of our group. In that vein, we formed a strategic team of public and private partners and are meeting with steering committee members. We are also compiling information for the literature review and for the cost benefit analysis. We are hoping to complete that with the research and data analysis department in DSHS and the EMAPS unit as well. Next slide, please. We are also meeting with community groups. We're providing them information about the pilot and seeking their feedback around the following questions. We seek to understand the goals and values individuals in Washington believe we should focus on and adhere to. Next slide, please. Feedback has really centered on equity and human dignity. So I'm really proud of Washingtonians. Also, one of the things that I really appreciated was that people value allowing folks to choose how best to support themselves and their families, to include caregiving for their parents or children. Next slide, please. We don't need to give money and opportunities to people so that one day they can begin contributing. They already have been contributing. This work is about removing the barriers that prevent people from contributing more. There is data that suggests there is value and profits lost to our communities when barriers prevent people from thriving. In addition to preserving the dignity of every individual in this great state, we believe that we need to invest in Washingtonians because in them is where we get our value, innovation, culture, creativity, and productivity. Our economy is stronger when all in our communities are stronger. When individuals can take a breath because they're able to meet their foundational needs and can choose their own paths, we all win. It is time to invest in our people, in all of our people. That's really the only business case that makes sense. Next slide, please. And then here's just some contact information to either communicate with us or learn more and follow this project. So that's all I have for you today.
Thank you, Megan. Okay, are there, while you all are getting your typing fingers ready, for any questions for Megan or about the feasibility study. Oh, there's a request, Leanna, to go back to the last slide real quick. And you can find out more information here. I will take a moment to verbally plug and put in the chat some information about the next opportunity that I know of to keep this conversation alive, and that is the United Way of Pierce County's annual From Poverty to Possibilities Summit on November 9th from 8 a.m. to noon. The theme of this year's summit is racial equity, how can we prosper together and disrupt poverty? The keynote is Heather McGee, who is fantastic, and the author of The Sum of Us, What Racism Costs Everyone and How We Can Prosper Together. And they will have a breakout session on guaranteed basic income and will feature a panel of amazing and influential speakers. So there is an upcoming opportunity, maybe not the next one, but an upcoming one for you all. So Megan, it looks like there's a question about any King County pilots underway. Would you be able to speak to that at all by chance?
Not in detail, just to say that we are connected with the various programs and pilots that are coming, that are establishing now and that are being developed. we're really grateful to be connected with so many folks that are doing this work in our communities. And so that's what I would say about those. We know there's several coming in King County as well. And Donna is putting up the information from Tacoma's, the GRIT program in Tacoma.
Okay, does anyone have any, I'm not sure that I can be Aisha for all sorts of obvious reasons, but does anyone have, we have 2 minutes left. Does anybody have any questions about any of the content from today? It looks like Heather's still here, Megan is still here. Is there anything else that anyone wants to ask, or any comments anyone wants to come off mute to make? I can give you back a minute of your day, but I also can sit here in silence and wait for somebody to ask a question. Heather, if you are still available, there's a question about expansions of New Leaf, of the New Leaf project.
Yeah, and the expansion is going to take place in January here in Vancouver for the expansion project, and in Toronto in 2022. And we're also working with an opportunity in Montreal. We've been connecting with a lot of individuals in the States, and certainly from Nashville to all over LA. And, you know, we've been providing our expertise as required in order to support people. But if anybody's interested in connecting or interested in expanding in your areas, and we could be of help, and we'd love to be involved in that process.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Heather and Megan, and all of you for coming, and for those of you who helped put this together and recruit these amazing speakers. It is 1:30, and I am going to turn you back out into your days. Please, maybe Abigail can give you just a minute to scroll through the chat and pull out any of the links that you haven't had a chance to do yet. And click on those and go forth and be inspired and excited and ready to take this on, hopefully as a much bigger thing in Washington State. I'm so excited to continue working with all of you. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Marcy. Great job.